Life Audio.
Just ahead on Encouragement for You, marriage authorities Dr. Greg and Erin Smalley discuss caring for each other's heart, and Gracia Burnham addresses a college chapel on her rescue from being held hostage by terrorists.
Welcome to the Encouragement for You podcast, brought to you by Encouragement Communications in association with the Salem Web Network and is part of the Life Audio Faith Toolkit series. For more inspirational, faith-affirming podcasts, visit lifeaudio.com. In just a moment, your host, Don Hawkins, will introduce today's episode. First, a word from our sponsors. Dr. Greg Smalley is the Vice President for Families of Focus on the Family, and he and his wife Erin joined host Don Hawkins to talk about the importance of caring for each other's hearts.
Greg, what are some of the specific obstacles that tend to get in the way of our caring for each other's hearts?
Yeah, it reminds me of, the verse that's in Song of Solomon that talks about the little foxes getting into the vineyard.
Sure do, yeah.
And I think that's a great analogy. I don't often think it's the big, huge events, infidelity or some abuse or addictions or whatever that can happen. The big things that can happen in a marriage. I think it's really what interferes is these little small day-to-day things where maybe we take each other for granted, maybe there's a lot of criticism. We just start slowly sort of drifting apart. And I think as that happens, people's hearts begin to shut down to some degree. Again, if there's a lot of criticism, if there's daily kind of hassles and battles between spouses that really don't go, they don't manage those, I just think the culmination, the effect of that is people shut down. And when someone shuts down, caring is the first thing that goes. Now they have negative beliefs.
Well, and it's because they don't feel safe.
Yeah.
And when safety isn't present in this intimate relationship, it's impossible to be caring and compassionate because your heart's closed down. When you don't feel safe, your heart closes, and then it's that connection that we all desire is very hard to obtain, almost impossible.
Yeah, sin's going to interfere. I think a selfishness, when I'm sort of consumed with my own stuff, it's pretty hard to really to care, and I think that's tragic. I really do think that this is, Erin and I were talking about this earlier, that there's a lost art of really knowing how to care for your spouse. And, I think as a guy, Don, I think that what's hard for us is that, we want to think our way through relationships.
Oh, yes.
We want to solve things and fix problems. And,
3 easy steps.
Yeah, exactly. and I think that's another part of it is that, the caring isn't something that's going to ever be head-to-head. It's always going to be heart-to-heart. And there's so much that, just think about the average person and how busy they are. That alone, just our hectic pace where we have no margin and we're running from one thing to the other. Well, who has time to care?
Right, especially moms and wives out there with running kids to and fro and dealing with their own emotions and being able to set those aside in order to really focus on their spouse and really take the time to really listen and to care about what they're dealing with.
What would you say is the first of our ways to care for your mate's heart?
Number one is to be compassionate. And compassion truly, it provides the motivation for expressing care to your spouse. So be compassionate, allowing that compassion just really to flow freely from your open heart to your spouse.
Because there are plenty of times that I have not been compassionate at all with Erin, and she's tried to share feelings, and I might say something like, well, that doesn't make any sense, or get over it, or, you know.
My favorite is when you say you shouldn't feel that way.
Oh,
that's the wrong way to feel.
Yeah, that's probably
ever says that.
Yeah, I was going to say.
The first year of our marriage.
Yeah, I was going to say, we husbands probably need to have removed that completely from our vocabulary.
Yeah. You remember when Jesus was, I think it was, wasn't it right before the feeding of the 5,000, where he was talking and teaching, and remember, he was tired and wanted to get away, but then it talks about he had compassion on the people, and they were like sheep lost without a shepherd.
Yeah.
And that's, again, I think that he did such a good job, and that's the great image of compassion. He looked at them as a shepherd would look upon his sheep. He had compassion on them. He could see that they were valuable, that they needed something.
You know, as I think about compassion in Scriptures, I recall all the references in the Gospels are to Jesus Christ, with the exception of one, and that was the father of the prodigal, I believe, who had compassion on his son.
Yeah.
And, it's just amazing to think about the modeling that Jesus did of showing compassion for people, some of whom, again, were not necessarily people that you would like. So step number one is be compassionate. What is step number two?
You know, this one is to seek to understand. And I think when we use compassion as a motivation into going, whoa, you are valuable, how you feel is valuable, then I think it sets up this thing to say, okay, so now what's going on? What's in that heart of yours? Help me to understand it. The research says that at least 80% of all conflicts happen because of misunderstandings. And that's why this is so important, to be curious. I mean, when we seek to understand, that conveys that we are curious, which is a great thing for relationships. It communicates humility, that I don't know everything, and this sort of this desire to, I want to do this a little differently. So, seek to understand. And we always tell people, the greatest phrase that you can ever use to really to help you to understand your spouse is just these three little words: help me understand. I mean, it's such a great thing. We can do this with our kids. We can do this at work. We can use this at any point in time. Anytime someone begins to share something, instead of reacting to that or defending or, judging or minimizing how they feel, we have the choice of saying, it helped me to understand. Yeah, I'm not quite sure. I'm quite getting it. Tell me more about this. Help me to understand. It is such a great, simple, practical tool that we can use that sends that message that you're important, and I want to understand you. I don't need to be understood right now. I want to understand you.
What is step number 3?
Step number 3, Don, is to validate their feelings. I love this one more than anything because it's so powerful when Greg looks at me and knows, I know he doesn't agree with what I'm feeling, or he might even think that it's out there, very different than what he thinks, but just him saying, what you are feeling matters to me, and you matter to me. There's just something so validating about that, just that, what you're feeling is what you're feeling. It doesn't have to be right. It doesn't have to be wrong. I just want to come alongside of you and just care about what you're feeling.
But I tell you what, though, the biggie, I think everything really is funneling down to number 4.
And number 4 is?
Number 4 is the key. I think when you start with compassion, and that moves you into understanding, which moves you into validate, I think ultimately the greatest gift that we can give our spouse is the gift of empathy. Because, sympathy is when we feel bad for someone. I mean, to have compassion means that you can feel bad for someone. But I tell you what, empathy is when you feel bad with someone. And my favorite story in the Bible is Jesus wept.
Yeah.
What I love is that he had compassion, and he understood what was going on. He validated by not jumping in to solve and say, hey, hold on, I'm going to raise Lazarus from the dead. Don't worry about it.
No need to cry. Get over it. I'm going to raise Lazarus. He didn't do that.
I love that he empathized with them by joining into their world. He was completely 100% present with this family and allowed their pain to touch his heart, to move him to tears. And then he sat there and wept with this family.
Yeah.
And I think that's when we enter into someone's world at that level, and we hurt with them, and we feel with them, and we are deeply moved by what they're going through, that's the culmination of all this. That's caring at its greatest form.
How can you
level.
How can you cultivate that, Erin, if you're not naturally an empathetic person? I can hear some people saying right now, yeah, that sounds great, but I'm just not that empathetic.
You know, and actually empathy is truly a learned skill. And you think about it, we start teaching our children this when they're little. You know, when, Maddie goes over and bops Garrison on the head, Maddie, what do you think Garrison is feeling right now? And that is the question you can start at. If you're not naturally a real empathic person, just stare at your spouse and think, what are they feeling right now? What are they experiencing right now? What would it be like to be standing in their shoes right now? What is their world like?
Yeah, I love Ecclesiastes. I can't think of the exact verse. I think it's 7:21 that says, don't pay attention to every word someone is saying. And I think for those of us who aren't great at empathy, we get caught up on the facts and who's right or wrong and what really happened and who's the and empathy moves past all that to the emotion.
We'll be back with more after a brief word from our sponsors. And don't forget to listen for Dawn's live weekend talk show, Encouragement Live, heard Saturdays at 7:05 p.m. Central Time on American Family Radio and other radio stations around the country, as well as on the worshipchannel.org. In our next segment, missionary Gracia Burnham addresses the students at Southeastern Bible College to describe her experience when she and her husband Martin were taken captive by Abu Sayyaf terrorists in the Philippines.
We'll just go ahead and get started, and so I'll start with the first question. Question is, how did your family, parents, in-laws, kids handle you and Martin's being held hostage?
Well, I think if you look at the results, things went really well. My dad's a pastor, so they're great people of faith. And Martin's mom and dad were missionaries in the Philippines in a tribal area, so they're people of faith. I remember when I got home from the jungle looking at my children and being just amazed at how well they were doing and how normal they seemed. And then I heard about all the millions of people who'd been praying for them. But I started to meet their teachers at school, and I started to meet their friends and the people in the neighborhood who would just visit with them and their youth workers at church. And then I suddenly understood why the children had done so well. They were surrounded by people who loved them and wished the best for them and kind of gave them good counsel, I feel like. So they have issues. If you were to ask the children, they said one thing that really bugged them was they never knew what was going on because people were trying to shield them from the ugly truth. And they said they would walk into a room and there would be FBI agents there, and all of a sudden everybody would clam up. They would say nothing. And so that bothered the children. But I've told them over and over, everyone was trying to do the very best for us. Everyone had our best interest at heart. And if people were quiet around you, it's because they thought it was best for you. And none of them have bitterness or anger or issues. They're good. So thank you for praying. I think it's because a lot of you prayed that the kids are doing so well.
The next question is, originally, what led you and Martin to the Philippines?
Martin grew up in the Philippines. He was going home. So that wasn't real hard for him. And people ask me when I was called to missions, and I don't think I was ever called to missions. I think I was called to Martin. I knew that I was supposed to marry Martin Burnham. But I had a real heart for missions, and I was so glad when he said, I want to be a missionary pilot. I was so happy to do that.
Another question is, during your time in the jungle, were there a particular passage of Scripture that the Lord used to just truly minister to your heart?
For sure. We found out how little Scripture we knew. You think you know the Scriptures till you don't have a Bible anymore. One day we decided we were going to name all the disciples just for fun, and we couldn't do it. I told you the story about being really mad at Musab. I don't know how many of you were in the first session. I was really angry at Musab one day. He often would give us extra stuff to carry, and I remember the weight on my shoulders and trying to get up those mountains, and all of a sudden I was asking God for encouragement one day, and the verses came to me, laying aside every weight and the sin that so easily besets us, let us run with patience the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who, for the joy that was set before him, endured the cross. He endured a heavy weight. He despised the shame, and now he's seated at the right hand of God. And that encouraged my heart that day. Run with patience the race that's been set before you. And my race that day was to get up those mountains with a good attitude. My race today is totally different. Run the race that God gives you today.
Did you ever laugh while in the jungle? Were there any moments where you just found yourself just
we
giggling?
laughed all the time. We knew we needed to laugh. We made sure we laughed. Mannerisms that the guys had, we kind of came to know the guys pretty well. And one of the guys who would cook, I told you about him last night, Bashir, the one that I get mail from the prison. He would get done cooking, and it's like you had to be at the fire that instant, or he really yelled at you. He'd go, lie, 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 plate, 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 bring your plate. And I thought, we have days in the jungle, there's nothing to do. Just little things that would happen, we would just laugh at them. Well, one day I heard Martin singing as we were walking through up and down mountains through the jungle, and I thought, he's probably singing some great hymn of the faith, right? And came to a rest, and I said, Martin, what were you singing back there? And he said, I was singing, come listen to my story about a man named Jed, poor mountaineer, barely kept his family fed. So, Martin would tell jokes. He kind of knew if I needed a stern talking to or whether I needed something to lighten my spirits. Good guy.
Another question. If the Lord called you back, would there be a hesitation for you to go to serve in the Philippines again?
No hesitation at all. I would love to go back, but things have changed for me. I'm kind of a tall tale. You know how stories grow and people give you credit for things you never did, and so I'm a famous person in the Philippines, and when I've been back, people have chased me through the streets like I was Jessica Simpson, and they're up on the walls and taking pictures, and I'm on the front page of the newspaper. So I couldn't just go be who I am. So I would have to have a strategy. How could I use that publicity to, what would my goal be? And that's why I think I'm not called, because I don't know what kind of strategy I would have to go back to the Philippines. But I would love to. I was a good pilot's wife, and the pilot's gone, so maybe I'm not supposed to go back there.
That kind of ties into the next question is, prior to your time in captivity, what was a typical day on the mission field for you?
The typical day for Martin was he flew every day, and we tried to get our flights in early in the morning because it's the tropics, and you know that right about noontime it's going to dump rain. So you've got to get your flights in. Our mornings would start early. I did the radio work. So I did what we called morning schedule. At 6 o'clock every morning, I called each of our tribal stations, and I asked them, do you have any traffic today? Do you have anything to say? And they would say, yeah, I have a grocery order. I need to talk to you about a dentist. I want to talk to this person. This person needs to talk to me about translation. And I would just start through and clear all the traffic. That took about an hour. I would get weather from where Martin was going to be, make any additions to the cargo list, and Martin would be out at the hangar loading up the airplane. When weather was clear and everything, he would fly in, and that's when I had to sit right by the radio. He would call me every 10 minutes to let me know where he was, because there's no radar or anything like that in airplanes there. And I would write down what time he called and where he was. In case he went down in the jungle, we would know where to start sending search and rescue.
This is back to your time in captivity. And then upon your return to the United States, what was it like to finally be in your own home, in your own bed?
It was nice. And every night when I lay my head on my pillow, I don't care where I am. I don't care if I'm in a hotel. I don't care if I'm on someone's roll-out bed in their laundry room. If I'm in my own bed. I'm just so thankful to have a place to be. 75% of the world's population does not sleep in a bed at night. They sleep in a hammock or they sleep on the ground. So I'm just thankful at night to be part of the 25% of the world population that gets to sleep in a bed now.
What was it like to go back home?
Yeah, I'm just very thankful. I noticed when I got home that things really changed for me. In the jungle, when I was thirsty, I begged God for water. I asked God for water. Then I got back to America, and when I was thirsty, I went over and I turned the tap on. And all of a sudden I realized that I wasn't asking God for anything anymore, because the fridge was full, the pantry was full, there was gas in the car, there was water coming out of the faucet, and I wasn't asking God for anything. And you can't, fault yourself for being that way, because that's how we are. And so you can't get back that feeling that you had when you were just so close and dependent on God. It's just different. All good things come from Him. Our water system in America is because He's been good to us. It's not because we've done anything. The fact that there's milk in our fridge is a credit to God giving it to us. We didn't really get it at the grocery store. He made sure we have it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Encouragement for You with Don Hawkins, host of Encouragement Live Radio and author of over 25 books, including Never Give Up and Master Discipleship Today. You can find more about Don and his books at encouragementlive.org. Encouragement for You is a production of Encouragement Communications with the Salem Web Network and lifeaudio.com. Editing by Phil Giebers, production by Elizabeth Andrade. If you enjoyed what you heard today, we'd love for you to head over to your favorite podcast app and leave us a review. It really does help people find us.
Let me take just a second to thank the team at Life Audio for their partnership with us on Encouragement for You. If you go to lifeaudio.com, you'll find dozens of other faith-centered podcasts in their network. They've got shows about prayer, Bible study, parenting, and more.
Stay encouraged and join us next time for Encouragement for You.